Welcome to Jesus Bible Study. We're going to be in the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. And I'm going to repeat that. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. You know, there was a story on the news a while back of people forming a chain with their arms to save a child stuck in a river. To keep, because the river was just rushing with all the mighty power of the water. The water is very powerful. The flow in the water stream is just strong. The current is strong. And they needed to be as strong as that current was. And in order to do so, they had to take many people to be a mighty one person. So together they all formed a linked chain, arm in arm, to keep the rescuer from being swept on down, and from the child, once it was being unstuck, to be swept away. Sin is no different than from a raging river, and the temptations of sin is very, very real. As with this story, it matters about the right people being around you. Could you imagine the hearts of those people, if they would have been different, that was there at that time, where that child would have been saved? That only maybe one or two would have cared and would have went up there and tried to save that child, and then tragically they was all swept away with the current, and then instead of one life being lost, 3 lives could have been lost. But because of the heart posture of those people that was surrounded that child that day, was able to save that child. So in life, when the people that we are surrounded by, it matters. Because they can either drown us right along with them in sin, or they can come together with us and save us from death. Sometimes people get the luxury of God separating certain people from everyone and everything, so they draw close and near and dear to God. Some people don't have the mindset that when they're around some other people, they will give God the focus that needs to be had. That they'll be too busy paying attention to what the other people are doing and what their reaction will be and what their thoughts will be. That they won't pay attention to what God is speaking to them. So God has to remove such people away from us so that all of our focus and mindset will be on God, so that He can save us from drowning. Some people find this upsetting and get upset. So why? And just, oh God, I'm so alone and this is just awful. Why would you do this? That's just like the Israelites when they was in the wilderness. God, why have you saved us, taken us out of Egypt, just for us to die of thirst in this wilderness, just to die of hunger in this wilderness? Most people are too focused on the complaining of what they don't have instead of focusing on what they do have and counting it all as blessings. That they lose sight of what God is literally trying to do. And therefore they don't end up making it to the promised land because they're too focused on themselves and too focused and not focused on God. The whole point of God drawing you out and away from everyone and everything and into this wilderness is so that your sole focus will be on gratitude and on God. We all too focused on sin itself that we don't pay attention to. Not everything technically is about sin. And what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't because of sin that the Israelites didn't make it into the promised land. For God knows that we're going to sin. God knows that we're going to stumble. God knows that we're going to fall. And the wages of sin is death. But we can overcome sin. Everything is possible with Christ. It says so in the scriptures. And in fact, multiple times, God and Jesus himself says, do not sin no more. And so people get so focused on sin itself that they think it's literally impossible. Like, well, it's impossible for me not to sin. I am a sinner. We're always going to sin. So this is just an impossible task. They get overwhelmed. They get consumed in that mindset and in that theory and in that thought that they literally give up believing that there's no way that they can conquer sin or get out of such a situation. But that is a lie of the devil. He wants you to be stayed in that trap on that hamster wheel, going back and forth and around and around and around and around, thinking that you'll never, I'm going to be in this sin, I'm going to keep sinning, I'm going to sin in that. And that is just not true. You can literally sin no more. In fact, if you love God truly with all your heart, mind, and soul, sin isn't even around you. You don't even think about it. It doesn't even come. It naturally makes you sick. You don't even think about it. That you literally was like, you know what? That's just not me. That's not who I am no more. I don't even do these things. You don't even realize it, but you become naturally a sinless person. Because your love for God is so great. In fact, the commandments, all they speak about is to love God, is to obey the commandments. To obey the commandments is true love. And here we're out in the world, sitting here thinking, what is the meaning of love? What is love? God is love. Jesus is love. That in fact, when you love someone or something so much, certain things no longer affect you anymore. So the world will no longer have its hold on you. Sin will no longer have its hold on you. But when you're surrounded by certain people, just like when you have the enemy sitting on your shoulder, all you're going to hear is their voices. All you're going to see is their actions. You're going to be listening to their way of thinking, their way of life, that it can contaminate your love. It can contaminate your mind. It can contaminate your actions. That you will be living constantly in sin. What you surround yourself with is what you're going to end up doing. What you listen to is what you're training your mind to think and to feel. That's why it's important to not listen to certain kinds of music. It's important not to read. Even people say music and they say movies and television shows, but the books you read, everything that you put into you, through your eyes, through your ears, is what you fill yourself with, is what you're corrupting your body with. So yes, Jesus may have been hung around sinners, but he did it to heal them and to fix them because they were sick and needed help. But when he hung with them, he didn't sin with them. So that's why it says you do not need to be